It all started with the statue. When we were young, we heard the stories. It was something you whispered about at night in the corners of our small town. A statue, dark and ancient, hidden deep in the forest. The legend said it had been there for centuries, the work of a long-forgotten sculptor who'd carved it in the image of a god no one dared to name. No one knew how it had gotten there. But everyone in the town agreed. You didn't touch it. They said the statue was cursed. Not in the way you'd expect. Not with flickering lights or shadows moving where there shouldn't be any. No. This curse was subtle. Something you couldn't see but could only feel. Like an oppressive weight that settled in your chest when you looked at it too long. The stories warned that anyone who tried to move it, to claim it as their own, would lose everything. Their friends, their sanity, their life. But that didn't stop us. We were young, arrogant, and stupid. We thought we could outsmart the stories. The curse didn't seem real to us. We were sure it was just another tale to scare kids, something old people whispered to make sure they stayed in line. But after what happened to Nick, none of us could deny it anymore. Nick was the first to fall. Nick was always the leader of our group, the one who would talk us into doing things we knew we shouldn't. And when he found out where the statue was, there was no stopping him. We could be rich, he said. Sell it, make a fortune. At the time, it didn't sound so crazy, so we followed him. That night, we drove out to the forest. The moon was a sickly, waning thing above us, casting long, twisted shadows on the road as we made our way deeper into the woods. When we found the statue, it stood in the clearing, just as the stories said it would. Black, cold, unyielding. Nick was the first to approach. He reached out, his hand shaking, but determined. You see? He smiled, his teeth white against the darkness. There's nothing to be afraid of. He touched it, and for a moment, nothing happened. The world didn't shudder. The trees didn't creak or groan. The earth didn't swallow us whole. But then, we heard the sound. A faint whisper, as though the wind was speaking to us from far away. But it wasn't the wind. It was something else. Nick's hand froze and his smile faded. He looked at us, his face pale, his eyes wide with fear. We have to leave, he whispered. Too late. We never saw Nick again. The next day, the police found his body in the woods. But it wasn't the body of the Nick we knew. It was wrong. His face had been twisted in terror. His fingers still curled around the air, as if reaching for something just out of his grasp. They said it was an accident, that he had gotten lost in the woods and panicked. But we knew better. We knew what had happened. It had started. After Nick's funeral, fear crept into all of us. Not the kind you get from a horror movie or a story told around a campfire. This was real. It was cold and suffocating, creeping under your skin like a disease. We no longer joked. We barely spoke. We just waited. Because we all knew this wasn't over. Claire was the first to try and fight back. We have to get rid of it, she said, her voice shaky as we sat in Rick's house, the statue between us like some silent, ominous presence. Rick shook his head slowly. You don't understand, he muttered, his fingers brushing against the dark stone. It has to be with someone. If you just throw it away. That's bullshit, Claire shouted, standing up abruptly, her breath ragged. I don't want to die. We all fell silent. None of us wanted to die. That night she went to the lake. She took the statue, wrapped in a bag, and drove through the dark, under the sickly glow of the moon. Her heart hammered in her chest as she made her way to the water. The lake was black, still, like a mirror reflecting only emptiness. Claire stood at the edge, hands trembling as she held the bag over the surface. Go away, she whispered, her voice breaking. Leave us alone. She let it go, and watched as the bag sank into the water, disappearing into the darkness. For a moment, there was relief. But when Claire returned home and opened the door to her room, the statue was waiting on her pillow. Black, dry, as if it had never been thrown into the water. Smooth, cold, as though it had always been there. Claire screamed. She tried to run. She changed the locks, stayed at a friend's house. But every morning when she woke up, the statue was there. And every morning, her face grew paler, the circles under her eyes darker, her gaze more empty, like someone who had seen too much. And then, one day, she vanished. We found her in the old well, a place none of us had ever been. Her body hung, awkwardly twisted, her arms spread wide, and at the edge of the well, on the wet stone, it stood, black, silent, waiting. Rick thought he could control it. Now, there were only two of us left. Rick had changed. He wasn't scared anymore. He said he understood, that he had figured out how it works. "It's not a curse," he said, his voice almost cheerful as he sat on the bed, clutching the statue. "It's a test." "A test of what?" I asked, confused. Rick turned to look at me. "If you can handle it." He never let go of it, not even when he slept. His fingers gripped it tightly, and the lights in his room were always on. He didn't eat. He didn't leave the house. I didn't see him for days. When I finally went to check on him, the door was unlocked. The smell hit me first, heavy and stale, as if the room hadn't been aired out in weeks. Rick was sitting on the floor, dead, but still holding the statue. His fingers were pale from the pressure. But the worst part, his eyes were black. Not empty, not glassy, but black, like the statue itself. As though, in that final moment, when life drained out of him, something had looked through him at me. I didn't scream. I couldn't move. I just stood there. And that's when I understood. Now, it was my turn. Now I am alone. I left. I abandoned the house, my job, my life. I changed my name. I lived in a strange town, with strange people, and I learned to never look back when I heard footsteps in empty hallways. I tried to forget. But one morning, I woke up and saw it. It was on my bed, black, still. I looked at it, and my heart froze. I knew what I had to do. I won't let go. I hold it just like Rick did. I don't sleep. I wait, but I can hear them. The ones who came before me, the ones she never let go. They whisper in the dark, and one day, I'll become one of them.